My guest today is Mikhail Lebedev. He is the scientific head at Higher School of Economics of Bioelectric Interfaces, author of more than 100 publications, and expert in brain-machine interfaces. So, you began with static motor control at famous Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology, investigated single unit activity on monkey brains during your PhD in Tennessee, and eventually conducted a fascinating research on giving monkey a head that can literally sense everything and distinguish how rigid objects are as a part of your Duke project. So my first question to you, did you have a plan to have such a brilliant career? And if so, what was the plan? And did everything go accordingly?
Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this interview. It's a pleasure to give it. So to answer your question, yes, I had some approximate plan for my career. So when I was studying at Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology, I was in this biophysics specialization. Then I met with Victor Gurfinkel, a famous motor control scientist, and then I went to work with him. So we did some motor control studies in humans, postural control studies, and so I was reading a lot of all kind of literature. And one particular piece of literature looked very fascinating to me. I read about experiments of Edward Everts in the United States, who was inserting electrodes in monkeys and recording from awake behaving monkeys. They did some motor tasks, and he could record activity of a single neuron. So this sounded very interesting to me. And then about this time, Giacomo Rizzolatti came to Moscow and gave a talk. And so it was very interesting. And he showed a video where a monkey was behaving. And there was like literally a discharge of a neuron inside the monkey's brain. So I really like this. So I thought, I would probably like to do this kind of research. Yeah, and then this opportunity came. So I went to the United States, to the University of Tennessee, Memphis, to work with Randy Nelson. And Randy Nelson was actually
So it was after
student.
your PhD. So it was to
No,
making your PhD.
It was about the time when the Soviet Union started to collapse. Iron Curtain was removed, so I could go. So I went to graduate school, and also to see the world, to see the United States. And Randy Nelson, he was a student of Everett, so he did exactly this kind of research
Oh,
that
so yeah,
he can
his student.
awake behaving monkey, and then inserting an electrode and recording. So I did a lot of experiments of this kind. Then I defended my PhD in Memphis, Tennessee. After that, I went to Trieste, Italy, to this institution is called SISSA. And there I worked with Matthew Diamond. And there we actually did experiments in rats, but one innovation was that we inserted not a single electrode, but many electrodes in the rat brain. So we could sample, let's say, 20 neurons at a time.
And you recorded the movements to predict.
So we studied the rat somatosensory system. So rats have these whiskers, and they use the whiskers to explore the environment. So in the rat brain, they have a really relatively big whisker representation in the brain. And so like if you tweak a whisker, then you get a response in the rat brain. And we did some neural plasticity studies. So I will not go into details, but let's say this rat has a lot of
Yeah,
whiskers, then you leave just two, and then the cortex adapts to using just two.
yeah, I know you even did the fascinating study in giving vision for that rats in another spectrum.
Exactly. But this was later. This was
Oh,
later at Duke University. But you're completely right that because this it's called a barrel cortex because each whisker sort of is represented by a barrel, and you can literally see them when you
mhm.
do histology. They have a lot of whiskers, then you cut all on this side and just leave two, and then the rat adapts to use it just two, and then cortical plasticity occurs. So what we would do, we would anesthetize the rat and then insert many electrodes and then record cortical activity and see how it plastically adapts after this manipulation with the whiskers. So, but like one important thing was that I started using many electrodes. And then after that, I went to NIH to work with Steve Wise. And there I did monkeys, both one electrode recordings and many electrode recordings. And what was interesting in this research, I studied the most advanced areas of the monkey, as prefrontal cortex, the one that the monkey uses to think. So, and there I trained monkeys to do really complicated tasks that even a human may not be able to do, at least for a long time. So the monkeys were supposed to remember something, like you show a monkey a target and remember where it appeared, then the target moves somewhere and the monkey is still watching this target, and then there is a stimulus and the monkey looks either at the target or at the place where it first appeared. And this way we tested working memory theory. So working memory is something that you use, for example, to remember a telephone number. You're given a telephone number and you keep it in memory for, let's say, 2 minutes. So this is called working memory. And the main theory is that prefrontal cortex handles this working memory. But by using these sophisticated experiments, but by disengaging the focus of attention from the remembered information, we were able to show that not all prefrontal cortex handles memory, but it also handles a lot of other things like spatial attention. And that, and while I was doing these experiments, multi-unit, multi-electrode recordings were really developing in monkeys. And Miguel Nicolelis was doing this. So he would implant a lot of electrodes in the monkey brain and then try to enable brain-machine interfaces, like the monkey thinks and moves something. So this research looked very interesting to me, and I had all the expertise to do this work. So I went to work with Miguel Nicolelis, and with him we conducted lots of experiments. So I would even say that we did all the pioneering work, like an interface that performs reach and grasp, then interface for locomotion, like the monkey would walk and we would decode walking patterns. Then sensorized interface, so the monkey moves a virtual arm and touches objects and then feels something. So we reproduce artificially a sense of touch. And finally, what we did was this interface for spatial navigation. So a monkey would be sitting on a cart and then drive itself in a room using brain activity.
Oh, so the several breakthroughs you went through. First was recording of motor location of people, of monkeys. The second, that you give them sense of touch, and that you were able to connect monkeys together to perform some
Yes.
tasks.
Yeah, exactly. Good that you mentioned this experiment where the monkeys were connected. So, like as I mentioned to you, that we typically did all the pioneering experiments. So we would do it, and then publish, and the other people would come and kind of reproduce and do incremental work. But then we would think, okay, so we did this. What is next? And the next was to use multiple brains to control brain-machine interface. So we would have 2 or 3 monkeys sitting in separate rooms, and we would connect all of these brains to a common task, like a movement of a virtual hand. So if one monkey operates this interface, then the interface is kind of shaky, so it would do like this. But if you sum the contributions from two monkeys, then the interface works better. It is less noisy, so it moves smoothly. Moreover, if you use 3 monkeys, then you can give each monkey a 2-dimensional task. You then integrate this, so all 3 control the 3-dimensional movements of a virtual arm. And I call this a super brain because you have several users, and each of them has some idea of what he's doing. Like, oh, I have a 2-dimensional screen, and I'm controlling this the movements of the virtual arm, but he doesn't know what the super brain is doing. A super brain, in this case, is controlling a 3-dimensional movement. So then you can think, oh, okay, but what happens if we connect, let's say, 10 or 100 brains? Then this would become a real.
Yeah, but you are using only the small piece, only the small electrode that covering only the brain area you're interested in. It is not the whole net, right?
Yeah, that's true. So in monkeys, you would insert electrodes in arrays in several places, like in both hemispheres, in the motor cortex, in the somatosensory cortex, in premotor cortex, then supplementary motor area, and there are some other areas. But we never covered like the whole brain. But
Yeah, because,
mhm.
oh, sorry,
So
interrupt you.
our record was close to 2,000 electrodes inserted in the
Mhm.
monkey brain, and like recording close to 1,000 neurons.
So it will getting more and more complex. Do we want to cover the whole brain? Is it something that field is tending to do? Or because
Mhm.
in some, for example, epilepsy, if you are talking, I also read some of your articles about brain cloud interfaces. And if you are going to accomplish some more advanced task, you want to cover more cortex, and you want to connect it maybe on the first stages to epilepsy patients when you can record all the data to gather signals and place either electrodes in more precise positions, either get data to connect it to the cloud in the future. What do you think about this?
Mhm. So, recording from the whole brain is a little bit, I would call, bureaucratic idea, or maybe administrative, because how an administrator thinks. Let's say DARPA person. So he says, what is the state of the art? And the scientists tell him, oh, okay, we can record 100 neurons simultaneously. So then he says, okay, then let's write a program call and then ask you to record 10,000 or 1 million. I think there was an announcement from DARPA for 1 million electrodes inserted. So this is kind of a little bit, yeah, exactly how these administrators, I think. Also, you know about this European Brain Initiative and then NIH Brain Initiative. So they are kind of similar, like, oh, okay, so let's record from the whole brain and let's model the whole brain. And when we record and we model the whole brain, then we'll know how the brain works. So, okay, but there is a little bit of problem that when you record more neurons, you get some ideas of how the brain works, but it is not guaranteed that mere quantity of
So you
neurons.
cannot test that right away.
Yeah, kind of before we have good theories how the brain works, merely recording many neurons does not help. On the other hand, it helps for sure to improve decoding. Let's say if I record 5 neurons and try to control this robot, then the control would be like this. Then I record 10 neurons, then the control gets better. To get to the next level of control, you need 100 neurons, then 1,000, 10,000, and so on. So this is a really good method. And modern technology helps us in this because nowadays there is a hope that you don't have like to insert the millions of electrodes in the brain. Maybe you can use some technology like nanotechnology, nanorobots. So if and when this develops, then there is a real possibility that you would have thousands or maybe millions of little robots sitting in your brain, and they would communicate with the outside recording system, and then this would be sent to cloud computing for computation. So this is why it was called the brain-cloud interface. But at this stage of development, this is mostly theoretical concept.
Okay, so we need a little bit and research brain a little bit more. So our next question is, do we have enough reliable data from MRI and EEG for brain mapping? Is it reliable enough? Because if you can make mistakes in implanting something to monkey, you cannot do the same mistake in surgery for humans. Is it a really problem or not?
So EEG is a signal that you record from the surface of the head. So this is not like you connect to the brain neurons directly, but there are some electrical signals that pass through the skull. They get attenuated and they higher frequencies are filtered out, and the signal is not so good. So it is good for some purposes. It is good when you are interested in synchronous activity of large neuronal populations. And for this kind of activity, there are terms, how they're called. They're called delta waves, theta waves, alpha waves, beta waves, gamma waves.
In different activity stages, where you're sleeping, where you're doing meditating, and all of that things. So, but do you think that we have enough precise data to put electrodes like neuroprothesis in the exact position where it will be effective?
Yeah, the answer is yes, because this neuroprosthetic device is an invasive device that you put directly in the brain to the area that you're interested in. And brain areas are studied very well. So
if you put 1 centimeter left or right, it wouldn't be that big problem.
It depends on what you want. There is a dispute regarding the brain between people that say functions are localized in the brain, and the other camp says no, functions are not localized, they are very distributed. And in fact, both are right in the sense that you may have a very localized area somewhere in the brain that does some particular job. But then it appears that this area is connected to many other areas, so it is really distributed. So in most cases, you can put an electrode anywhere, and then you can use this activity for something, for some kind of control, because the brain is very plastic and it can plastically adapt to pretty much any task.
So you just will need to think harder about that to get less noise and
Yes,
with
yes,
time train your brain to use this particular region for you.
exactly. Exactly. Train is the learn, train yourself is the main thing. And in fact, this plasticity is not just happens when you do want to learn something new. It happens all the time and constantly. Like if you put on, I don't know, a magnifying glass, then your world changes a little bit, but then you immediately adapt. Why? Because your brain is very plastic and you can adapt. So plasticity is a key mechanism of the brain, and it is ongoing. So you need it for any task you do.
Okay, so if placing electrodes is not a big problem and we already can record signals, decode them, and more or less control movements, what are the main problems of the fields of brain-machine interfaces to cure people with it, blind people, paralyzed patients? What are the main problems?
Mhm. So the main problem currently is biocompatibility. You can put a recording array in the brain and get a very good recordings from very nice single units that correspond to single neurons. But then the brain says, oh, wait a second, there is a foreign body inside me, so let me protect myself from this foreign body. And then these electrodes get coated by glial cells, and they form a seal, and then your recording quality decreases. And then you no longer record nice single neurons like Elon Musk showed recently, but instead you record some kind of noisy signal. It is a mixture of neurons, local field potentials, so the signal is not so good. So when you read about human trials, like, oh, amazing, a paralyzed person is moving a robot, then they all deal with this low quality signal, but somehow they still have like to speak highly of their research, so they do not say, oh, all our electrodes got encapsulated, recording quality is bad, so no, they say,
Yeah,
oh,
they
okay,
just leave left behind that. Okay, we can do
exactly,
that, but only for two
exactly,
months. Sorry.
exactly. Exactly.
So, do
So,
you
so,
know
so,
more?
so basically, yeah. Once again, biocompatibility is the major problem. So, once these electrodes are made biocompatible and safe, then it will be a real revolution.
Okay, so it is one of the challenges to make it more biocompatible. So we need more biologists and engineers in that sphere. Is it a matter of time and investments where people can order brain-machine interface to rehabilitate after stroke, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. The progress is very rapid. So, uh, even maybe in like 5 years, you will see that people will be implanting chips in their brains, yeah, for some purposes. Yeah, and the major problem, the major purpose, of course, is medical. Like if there is a damage to the brain, it needs to be repaired, and interfaces of this sort can repair the damage.
That sounds like a fairy tale. Like we are moving toward future so fast. But what is the worst case scenario for people implanted with brain machine interface? What is the worst thing that can happen to him?
So let's start from the good case scenario first. So there is a blind person, then he gets implanted with electrodes in the visual cortex. They stimulate, he first sees like flashes of light, and these electrodes are connected to a camera. So he points a camera somewhere, and this image from the camera is transmitted to the visual cortex, and he starts to see. So the vision is restored. So this is a good case scenario for visual restoration. And it is interesting that it will likely work for many senses, because when you stimulate a brain, it's typically some sort of unnatural stimulation. So first the brain says, what's going on? Like I have a very fine structure, neurons, and then you stick this electrode and just stimulate everything. But then, again, the brain is very plastic, so it can learn the meaning, it can learn what we want from him. So it will be possible to restore vision, um, hearing. You already can restore with cochlear implants, yeah, and hopefully soon with brainstem implants. You can restore the sense of touch. We did this in monkeys. So interfaces can work in the vestibular system. So all this is possible. And in all of these cases, you just stimulate the brain figures out what you mean by this, and then you get positive effects. Now imagine that you inserted this electrode in your pleasure area, or motivation area.
Would
Then
it be like a new kind of drugs or like
yes,
mouse and
exactly,
cocaine?
exactly, exactly. You have an electrode in the brain, you press a button and you feel
So
good.
you can just
Yeah.
go to black market and
Yes, yes. And actually, this is a real possibility, like, and a real danger. So,
but
the only reason why this is not happening, like, with many people, because you still need a neural surgery to insert this electrode. So it is expensive.
but
So this is you
for
insert it
example,
by yourself.
there is some blind person. Can this person be some kind hacked? So you record his data and can do something about that, or
So,
maybe reprogram that to put
okay.
another stimulus, or maybe you have already some ethic hackers who are working to solve these problems.
So to hack a stimulator, that's a real possibility. Like you say, you implant. There is a person with depression, and you implant a stimulating electrode to deal with depression. But then there is a external link to this, and somebody comes with a computer and reprograms you, and then he can literally gain control of you, because experiments in rats have been conducted where they insert one electrode in the pleasure area and then two electrodes in the somatosensory cortex. Then the researcher has a remote control and presses like go
Oh
to
my
the
god.
right, and the rat just walks. You just literally control the rat movements by remote. And there's motivation system is very powerful, and you can gain control over a human being
So we
easily.
need
And maybe even
more.
in more sophisticated terms, you can inject ideas and reward, and then this person just
Oh,
likes these ideas, but not others.
it is the whole book of ideas that can go wrong with it. It sounds like we need to put attention to maybe hire some people who can try to hack that for money, and if they are not succeed, uh, then maybe other won't be succeeded. And if they succeed, this can learn people to prevent future attacks. So it's
Yeah,
also
yeah, yeah.
about money.
Probably, yeah, probably soon we will have this brain hackers. Like, oh, I have a problem. Like somebody invaded my brain. No, wait a second. Ah, exactly. Fixed.
Oh, yeah, so probably politicians won't be allowed to do these kind of operations.
Yeah, some evil politicians. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Um,
I don't know about any of secret research, but logically you can guess that maybe the, some
so
people
because
actually.
usually this a lot of researchers are accelerated with more with government grants and fundings.
Mhm.
And the government is particularly interested in devices that can be handy in military purposes. So this is potential target, do you think,
Uh,
for
yeah, I think so. I myself worked on a DARPA grant, but it was like open public. It was not any secrets, and so mostly they cared about developing this technology. So I don't know what exactly these military people are thinking, but in principle, they are probably looking at this technology, and if they see something useful for themselves, so they will most definitely use it to build a better military. So yes, but on the other hand, the government is kind of disorganized. There is a this grant review system. It is not very good because let's say you are in a highly competitive field, you apply for a grant, but it gets reviewed by your competitors and they try to push you from this field. So uh, um, so government on one hand has some wishes, but they are also not the most efficient organization to quickly achieve some progress. And in this sense, what Elon Musk is currently doing with his private company is pretty interesting because he just runs it as a business and quickly moves forward. So there are still some questions like, do you want to run science as a business? Maybe yes, maybe no, because like scientists like to carefully study things. So there is no rush. But on the other hand, some business but, business structure could be really helpful.
yeah, because also in Europe there are mainly government fundings that
Mhm.
help these kind of fields to be competitive, to raise money for that. And here we have problem that a lot of time spent for writing applications and proving that your research is really worth investing. So that's why my next question is, what is your weekly routine consists of? How are you spending your, what is your typical week of work?
So it changed over the years. When I was doing a lot of monkey research, I would come to the lab and I would spend maybe 3 hours recording from one monkey and maybe 2 hours recording from the other monkey. Then I would get the data, look at the data, analyze. Then I would have a write a paper and publish. So my major schedule is just start something, implement, analyze data, publish, and then this is it. So
Mhm.
um, this doesn't look very practical because I haven't created some machine or something. But once I publish, people will read and they will use these ideas. So our work has many citations and
Yeah, this eventually came from the step of rats to the monkeys. And I
exactly,
know, are you
exactly.
now going to clinical research?
So we are
I
actually
just
doing,
heard about that. So,
yes, we are doing clinical research in Moscow in the Center for Bioelectrical Interfaces. So we have patients, these are epileptic patients who have electrocorticographic grids put over their brain for around like 3 to 4 days, and this is needed for the medical purposes. But what we can do, we can ask the subject just to do some simple experiments, for example, move the finger in different directions. And then this way we can use human subjects and use activity recorded in the human brain. And this is very good because to a human you can just say, like, can you do something? And then
yeah,
the human understands. With monkey, you need to train
communication
for
is
two
much
months.
easier.
Yeah, exactly. So the human can quickly do the task you want him to do. Yeah, and the signals recorded with these grids, so they're not harmful for the brain because they stay on the surface of the grids of the brain. And currently there is a progress in these devices. They used to have large electrodes all over the brain. Now it is a small grid with small electrodes and densely spaced. And this way you can get a signal of a better quality.
So these little steps with mapping brain to get more precise data. Uh,
Yes. Mhm.
o- okay, so but can you give us a glimpse on what are you doing now? Because I also heard that you had some secret projects in Duke. Probably we don't know, but maybe where are your plans going in future?
Tell me
What?
more. Tell me more about this secret project. I have several projects on my mind. Some of them would be hard to describe it because they're kind of theoretical. So I will have to go into long explanation about this. But one of my projects is the following. So you may have heard that Nobel Prize was awarded for the studies in rats, for the studies of spatial representation in rats.
Was
So
it in computer science or was
no,
it in
it was
medicine?
in physiology and medicine,
Physiology.
and
Was it this year?
no, it was several years ago. I think 2009, but
Uh-huh.
I will have to check. So,
We will
yeah,
put the link.
they received this Nobel Prize for for the discovery of the so-called place cells and grid cells. So these neurons are in the hippocampus and in the entorhinal cortex of rats. So basically, the idea is that when a rat or a mouse or even a human is in space, there is an encoding going on in the rat brain. So how it is currently described, the brain has a map of your external space. So, yeah, these Nobel Prize winners, they studied this representation a lot, but what they didn't do sufficiently, and they didn't study how these representations are related to the actual animal behavior. So my little project currently is to study this behavior better and try to link it with the properties of the cells. Sort of a little bit against this Nobel Prize, but I think it will end up with some additions to our current
Yeah,
knowledge.
it's very perspective. It started all, as I know, with cats and recording signals from their neurons when on the recessive field, they put just some light and recorded a signal from that to see what is firing and put a signal into noise so you can actually hear how it is firing. And now it's so much progressive that you can link that to behavior. It would be very interesting to know how is it working.
Yeah, yeah, I think you will see a lot of progress in understanding the brain. And what helps is that mathematicians came to this field, and neurophysiologists, they record lots of brain activity. And now mathematicians are trying to make sense of how the brain works. And there has been progress made in artificial intelligence. So now people can compare, like, oh, artificial intelligence works this way, and let's compare this to the brain. And they say, ah, okay, there are similarities. So maybe the brain is doing something like this, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so the
Of course,
more
one more thing before. But of course, if you like look at the history of the brain studies and look at the available technology, always they try to explain the brain in terms of the existing technology. For example, there was a concept of reflex. So you stimulate and then there is a reflectory movement. So and people built these theories based on this reflex loops, feedback, and so on. Why? Because at that time, technology was based on these simple electronics with simple forms of feedback. Then computers came, computer was invented, and they said, ah, okay, the brain is a computer. Now these neural networks have developed and say, ah, okay, so the brain is probably like a deep learning network. So when
yeah, we
people
yet
invent
maybe
something
don't.
else, they will compare the brain to this new invention.
Okay, maybe it will be quantum computers or something completely new.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the more people new from different fields are coming, the more exponential it is. So my question is more down to earth. What are specialists that are the most wanted by and can bring the most into these fields? It is just for students, for high school guys who just want to know where do they need to go to have more opportunities maybe in this.
Mm-hmm. So I was watching Elon Musk just recently, a week ago. So and he said, oh, okay, we want to hire people, so come to work for our company. But then he said, oh, but some people say that I don't know anything about the brain. He said, no problem, you will learn. So this is easy. It is more important if you are a good engineer, good mathematician, good material scientist. So this is partially true because if you have a very good skill, let's say in programming or in engineering, in mathematics, then you will find your piece of work. But also we need biologists because biologists understand the substrate of the brain.
Yeah, biocompetitive problem needs to be
Yeah,
solved.
yeah. For example,
Material
yeah,
scientists.
yeah.
So what do you think experience outside brain-machine interfaces could advantage candidates?
I would say it again.
Uh, so what do you think experience outside brain-machine interface could advantage potential
Absolutely,
people?
absolutely. Like new people with new ideas, with different experience always help. Yeah, like you have to look at the problem with fresh eyes. So and now these brain-computer interfaces are very technical. So you really need good engineers, uh, good people who can can design and build new electrodes, and maybe soon it will not be like a needle inserted in the brain. It could be like a little piece of dust that will sit in your brain, or maybe even a nano robot.
We really need engineers. We really need more people interested in mathematics and
So
programming.
engineers and mathematicians are definitely needed. So these are primary people, but all kind of people. I think even philosophers may help.
Of course,
Although,
with ethics, they have a lot of job, and with law, the more advanced it
oh,
gets.
actually, lawyers will be needed to handle the problems that you mentioned, like brain privacy, etc.
Yeah. So we are on the barrier, on the horizon where something our life can, I think, significantly change with coming more brain machine interfaces step by step, but they already take over people with hear loss. Soon it will be paralyzed people.
Mhm.
And can we expect a noticeable change in our daily life for in 2050 people? So we can prepare ourselves to that.
So our daily life will definitely change, but maybe not very soon because these technologies are currently applied mostly to patients, to neurological conditions. Healthy person would need a brain machine interface when this technology surpasses your normal abilities. Like if I can sense with my hand, why do I need stimulation in the brain? Would it be any better? So currently it wouldn't, but at the moment when it becomes better, then people will want this stuff, and then
So we can
they
think
will become
about
cyborgs in a sense.
maybe in 50 years just learning something new via direct simulation with that uh, interfaces and
Uh,
maybe
mm, something you mean like connect the interface and learn something
uh,
like instead
yeah,
of
it would be very helpful for
yep, exactly. So, but it will start with very simple ways of learning, but eventually it may come to, to how this is described in science
even
fiction.
problem solving and connection people together with their brains to some computer to accomplish some tasks. Maybe as a developer, you of course put a lot of thoughts on what future can be. So maybe my last question, do you have some scenarios in your head how it can be?
Okay, so as a scientist, I am resistant to very futuristic scenarios. Like, I wouldn't promise you that you in your life will be communicating with people directly through the brain. But I can tell that the technology is moving in these directions. So, and I may be even wrong about how soon this happens. So it could be that you really don't use your phone, but just communicate
Yeah,
by
like
the
calling Tesla with just power of mind.
exactly. But Elon Musk is like this. He's saying all these things like, oh. We will improve everything. You will just it will be just brain communicating with the computer. So there is some truth to this, but I would prefer to see good evidence, good progress, and then make such predictions. But as I said, this technology is developing really well, and we will see many amazing things. Like restoration of vision to the blind, then the restoration movement to the paralyzed, and even artificial parts of the brain, like there is a stroke, some part of the brain becomes dysfunctional, you insert artificial area, and then it takes over this missing parts.
So step by step, we are moving forward. Each is just matter of
Exactly, step by step.